Warning: My second text, Audition, is graphic and potentially upsetting to some viewers. I've toned it down as much as possible, though I haven't been able to fully avoid its contents. Good evening, everyone. As you already know, my name is Ellis Plant. My chosen texts are Yukio Mishima's novel The Temple of the Golden Pavilion and Takashi Miike's film Audition. Miike's film is a modern expansion of Mishima's work. Why? Because both texts share corresponding themes and ideas, though use different historical contexts and mediums to explore them. Both texts effectively examine the problems Japan has faced throughout the 20th century through illustrating the destruction of beauty following major events such as the World War II Hibakusha and the rise in Hikikomori numbers in the 70s to 90s, and how this destruction has contributed to Japan's intense sense of alienation. Yukio Mishima's novel The Temple of the Golden Pavilion uses its bleak post-World War II context of the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombings and the stemming Hibakusha to examine isolation and the destruction of beauty in Japan. Mishima's protagonist, Mizoguchi, has had a deep sense of detachment since his youth, as he once witnessed his mother's infidelity in the presence of his dying father. This led to the obliteration of a beautiful family in childhood, molding Mizoguchi into a stutterer and a figure repulsed by immense beauty. One day, Mizoguchi witnesses an attack on the main factory in Osaka. Mishima's use of analogy in Why Are a Man's Intestines Ugly unveils Mizoguchi's alienation from everyone else, as many are repulsed by his stutter. The use of rhetorical question explicates how the sight of an injured man's innards conceives Mizoguchi's romanticization of ugliness, as he finds solace in knowing he isn't the only one person out there who is isolated because they're different and considered ugly. Moreover, Mishima uses a simile in Beauty is like a decayed tooth, as one looks at the small, dirty, brown, blood-stained tooth lying in one's hand. One's thoughts are likely to be as follows. Is this it? Is this all it was? That thing which caused me so much pain, which made me constantly fret about its existence, which was stubbornly rooted within me, is now merely a dead object. This clearly highlights how Mizoguchi believes beauty is insignificant, and that people become too infatuated with it. It's because of others' infatuation with beauty that Mizoguchi is alienated and wants to destroy it. Mizoguchi's situation reflects post-World War II Japan, as the bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima saw the discrimination of the Hibakusha. The Hibakusha were survivors of the atomic blast, and it didn't matter if they were physically scarred or not, they were still at risk of being ousted, even by other Japanese. Michiko Kodama, a survivor of the bombings, once mentioned how people said the Hibakusha had the blood of the devil. Mizoguchi symbolizes the segregated Hibakusha's broken psyches, exuding a volatile rage towards glamour due to his lack of it. This is apparent through his jealousy of the mesmeric Golden Pavilion, which he eventually burns down. When Kashiwagi says, "Beautiful scenery is hell," isn't it? Mishima's use of a paradox illustrates Mizoguchi's sense of ugliness and alienation, which explains his yearning to destroy beautiful things. By putting the words beautiful and hell in the same clause, Mishima displays Mizoguchi's outsider persona, as the two words are not commonly associated together, just as people don't want to be associated with him. Mizoguchi further exhibits the loneliness of the Hibakusha through his inability to find a woman interested in him, as many had trouble marrying. When Mizoguchi finally finds a date, he becomes flatulent and disappoints her, to which she jokingly remarks, "Are you sure that was your first time?" This girl and the other characters that antagonize Mizoguchi resemble those who derided the bomb survivors, while Mizoguchi himself represents the victimized, isolated Hibakusha whose beauty was destroyed by both the bombs themselves and the prejudice they faced that they survived them. Overall, Yukio Mishima's novel The Temple of the Golden Pavilion examines alienation and the destruction of beauty through the World War II bombings of Japan and the inequity towards those that survived them. Mishima's key ideas in this novel were to be further explored in the 1990s in Takashi Miike's film Audition, though Miike's context also adds in the Hikikomori, a people who were not discovered until over a decade after Mishima's novel's conceivement. Takashi Miike's film Audition expands upon Mishima's explored themes of alienation and the destruction of beauty through a modern lens, utilizing Japan's Hikikomori and the prejudiced Hibakusha to do so. The Hikikomori, first discovered in the 1970s, are lonely Japanese recluses refusing to leave their homes and unable to socially interact for months or years. But why is this? Well, Japanese society itself is said to be a primary cause of the Hikikomori. When interviewed by the BBC, Takahiro Kato, an associate professor of psychiatry who studies and treats hikikomori, said, "Rigid social norms, high expectations from parents, and a culture of shame make Japanese society a fertile breeding ground for feelings of inadequacy and a desire to keep one's head below the parapet." Japan's culture of shame links back to the Hibakusha, and it makes sense the Hibakusha also became Hikikomori due to severe ostracization from the citizens of Japan unaffected by the bombings. Miike's protagonist, Aoyama, becomes a recluse after the death of his wife, eventually holding a fake movie audition in search for his ideal woman. Aoyama and Mizoguchi are both alienated figures who struggle with asking out women. Aoyama's new partner, Asami, is also very similar to Mizoguchi. Asami, like Mizoguchi, displays violent behavior due to a sexually traumatic past, as her childhood ballet teacher abused her. Asami's gratuitousness is evident throughout the film as she brutally harms her lovers if they ignore her request when she asks them to tell me you'll love only me. Asami's violence is further examined when she murders her ballet teacher with piano wire. Miike utilizes exaggerated sounds, such as the piano wire tightening and the scorching of the ballet teacher's flesh and blood, and contrasts them with the sounds of a beautiful piano piece, to illustrate how the ballet teacher has destroyed Asami's beauty. The ballet teacher's dialogue, "You're wonderful," as he is killed, as well as the dark blue lighting and color palette, which tint the entire scene, reflect his twisted alienation of Asami, which destroyed her life and mental state. Both the ballet teacher and Asami are destructive personalities intent on wrecking beauty. Therefore, both share similarities with Mishima's protagonist Mizoguchi. Moreover, Miike's POV close-up shot of one of Asami's old lover's hands lets the audience see Asami's brutality as he only has his thumb and ringed finger remaining. Like Mizoguchi, he is disfigured and isolated, displaying traits of both the Hikikomori and the Hibakusha, as his defacement and discrimination at the hands of Asami has forced him indoors perpetually. Furthermore, the rack focus switched to a low angle of Asami holding a dog bowl elucidates how the man in the bag is alienated and treated as inferior due to his repulsiveness. Finally, Miike's use of a yellow color palette, the color of both madness and happiness, in the final scene, symbolizes Asami's joy after no longer being alienated and finally finding someone who accepts her, despite her non-compos mentis. The soft piano score and camera zoom from a wide shot to a close-up makes the audience sympathize with Asami after having witnessed her alienation due to the destruction of her beauty by her abusive ballet teacher, and how this trauma has caused her to destroy the beauty of others, alienating them too. This is what Asami says.
またこうしてお会いできるなんて思ってなかったので、すみません、枯れてしまって。今までずっと一人で頑張ってきたけど、私には相談できる人がいなかった。青山さんみたいに温かくて私の気持ちを包んで分かってくれる人に会ったのは初めてです。
Miike's ending parallels the climax of Mishima's novel, as both Mizoguchi and Asami find peace by the end of each tale. In Mishima's novel, the end sees Mizoguchi burn down the Golden Pavilion, the main source of his hatred, and so in the final line he says, "I wanted to live." In conclusion, Takashi Miike's film Audition expands upon Yukio Mishima's novel The Temple of the Golden Pavilion, by investigating the same themes of alienation and the destruction of beauty. Both also allude to the ridiculed Hibakusha when commenting on these themes, though Miike's modern take also utilizes the Hikikomori. Furthermore, the uncanny resemblances between both texts, such as the disfigurement of characters, violence towards beauty, figures with sexually traumatic pasts, and the Japanese setting, all reinforce how Miike has crafted a modern take on Mishima's beloved 1956 novel. Due to the obscurity of both of my chosen texts, I found it difficult to research them, thus most of my analysis is my own. For the Hikikomori and Hibakusha research, I used an even mix of JSTOR and normal articles. I also researched how to turn an essay into a speech, as I found that to be the most challenging aspect of this assessment. Furthermore, I researched Hiro Onoda, a Japanese man who fought World War II until the 9th of March 1974, and came back to an evolved Japan that, in his eyes, had been destroyed. I also looked into the lost decade in the 1990s, which saw an economic downfall in Japan. I originally linked Onoda and the lost decade to the Hikikomori, though didn't find strong enough evidence to keep them and needed to cut down on my word count. If I was to do this task differently, I think I would have my first text be more well-known, so I can strengthen my argument more by bringing in well-read writers' arguments. However, I liked having my second text be obscure and analyzed solely by me, so I would keep that how it already is. Thank you all for listening.